Hey guys, Nishquik here. I am back once again with Mr. Jeff from Nintendo Vault. And last time we were talking about the Nintendo Switch Legacy, and what we think and what we enjoy about the Switch and its amazing lineup of first-party games. And today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite game genres, the JRPG genre. So Jeff, you want to fill the returning audience or the newcomers in on your content and what kind of games you enjoy real quick?
Hello everyone, Nintendo Vault here. Jeff from Nintendo Vault, actually. I do a lot of Nintendo content, make Nintendo news, videos, discussions, rants, things like that. But I also cover a lot of JRPGs and JRPG news. So if you're interested in Nintendo and or JRPGs, drop on by. There's a place there waiting for you. What are you waiting for?
Heck yeah. Go give his videos a watch, subscribe to him, give his videos a like. I think we might have some overlapping audience. So yeah, go check out his stuff. Anyways, we're here to talk about JRPGs. So first, can start with just some neutral stuff, maybe go into some controversial stuff, then end with some very wholesome positive things. So I wanted to ask you, do you think this JRPG genre, do you think there's a massive barrier of entry? Because a lot of people seem to be very hesitant about getting into this genre, playing these kinds of games, maybe because of the art style, the dialogue, the combat, maybe too complicated, the graphics may not be up there, story might be too obtuse. What do you think about all this?
Yes, there is a bit of a barrier to entry for a lot of JRPGs. Not all of them. Some of them are pretty standard RPGs where anyone could jump into, but there is a bit of a barrier of entry. And I say that in terms of a lot of JRPGs are very Japanese. It's just they are, you know. You'll notice a huge overlap between people who enjoy anime, manga, and JRPGs because there's so much overlap in terms of tropes, cliches, cheesy dialogue here and there. Of course, the hot spring scene in every JRPG and anime in existence, right? So yeah, there's a little bit of a barrier.
Except when it's foreshadowing future story elements like in Xenoblade.
Exactly, it all makes sense now. But I mean, yes, there is a bit of a barrier of entry, but we also have to realize JRPGs have grown so much. There's plenty of JRPGs you can jump into and not get a whole lot of that cheesy Japanese stuff. A good one, for example, is the original Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. That's one of the least Japanese JRPGs out there, besides the art style. There's a lot of just regular RPG elements. The characters act pretty normal, how regular people will act. There's not a whole lot of that cheesy dialogue. It's really just like any other RPG. There's a lot to go through. So if you're one of those people that are hesitant because of the art style or the anime-esque appearance of the game, look for games that will fit you a little bit better. I think even Fire Emblem, there's a lot of Fire Emblem games you could jump into. Maybe a little bit of the older ones that are a little bit less of that kind of anime inspiration, but there's a lot out there for you if you're interested in them. Now, if you are an anime and you're familiar with Japanese culture and their writing styles and the way that they write dialogue, then you have no excuse. You've got to jump into some JRPGs because you're missing some really big experiences, especially in terms of narrative and storytelling and world building. And there's just so much that they offer you that other game genres will not offer you nearly as good. So yes, I think there's a bit of a barrier of entry, but what do you think, Nish?
I think there is a barrier of entry, but I also think that oftentimes a lot of people create their own problems when it comes to these games, if that makes sense. I feel like people view a combat system or view a gameplay mechanic and automatically label that as outdated or bad or tedious without even trying it. Or maybe even if they do try it, they may not understand it to its full extent and may not take the time outside of the game or maybe within the game itself to actually learn it or fully kind of immerse themselves within that whole mechanic of the game. But outside of that, I feel like the whole argument of dialogue and art style and all that, yeah, of course, you're gonna have games that don't all look realistic. You're gonna have games that are stylized. You're gonna have games that don't always have like super Hollywood movie theater like dialogue, and that's where JRPGs come in. And I think you might agree with this, but a lot of JRPGs, even if they might have cheesy dialogue in one scene, in the next scene they're talking about the fate of the universe and the existence of mankind and existentialism and all of this like crazy philosophical things that come out of nowhere, and you're like, wow, I never experienced that in normal games. And there's the thing is, my point is, a lot of people point fingers and create their own problems instead of accepting, understanding, and appreciating so many good things that are already present within the game, which they are just kind of turning a blind eye to. So that's where I'm coming from as well.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, in terms of all the games I've played, and I've played a lot, again, I am an old crippled man. JRPGs have offered the best in terms of dialogue. They've offered the best in terms of narrative. They've offered the best in terms of storytelling. And this is coming from somebody who played God of War 2018, who's played The Last of Us, who's played these big hitter blockbuster games from other publishers. I still think that JRPGs stand above, depending on which one you play, at what time you play, which franchise you pick. They have better storytelling in a lot of cases. And in terms of like the combat argument and things like that, well, listen, there's a JRPG for any occasion. There's a JRPG for any genre. Trust me, you can play different kind of genre JRPGs. They have the action JRPGs with like the Tales of series where it's more action paced, or they have the turn based with a lot of the older Final Fantasies, or they have the slower action based combat with Xenoblade, and they even have things like FPSs and all strategy games and roguelites. You can find a genre that you're interested in. You just have to kind of...
What's the FPS JRPG that you know of?
There's a couple, but I have to remember them. I know for sure they have.
I'm very curious to.
I wonder if it's, I'd have to look it up.
But what I think about it, like, one thing that's intrinsic to JRPGs for me is unique combat, because one series is not going to have the same style of combat as another series, if that makes sense. Like, think about like even though Kingdom Hearts and Tales are both considered action RPGs, they're very different. Tales is more methodical and more like planning out certain moves with your certain moveset, whereas Kingdom Hearts is like a hack and slash kind of game where you're going full force aggressive. And even like an MMO style game like Final Fantasy 14 is different from Xenoblade Chronicles, which has MMO inspired combat but is not necessarily an MMO. And even turn-based games like Persona and Shin Megami Tensei are different in their mechanics compared to like a game like Octopath or a classic Final Fantasy. Like Bravely Default, Octopath, they have their own kind of mechanics. Classic Final Fantasy has ATB mechanics, whereas Persona and SMT have fusion mechanics and elemental weakness mechanics, and SMT has essences and miracles and all these really cool mechanics that create a very well-rounded, well-developed, and engaging and flat-out addicting combat system. And I stand by that case. Every single JRPG franchise has a very different, very unique combat system. So yeah,
agree. And by the way, the game I was thinking of is Valkyria Chronicles. It's more strategy, but it's also like FPS. You played as an FPS.
So basically, Valkyria Chronicles to me is a more real-time Fire Emblem, because it is tactics. From what I've seen, I've yet to play any of the games, but from what I've seen, it is more of a command-based shooter than an active real-time shooter, but it is more real-time than something like Fire Emblem. But I do agree with you there. Yeah. But yeah, what do you think about like JRPG combat systems? What are some of your favorites? I'm curious to hear about that.
They're very, like you said, they're very widely varied, and a lot of them are just, they offer so much customization and fun. It's hard not to get like addicted to a lot of these systems and see what your character can do and push things to the limit. Like right now I'm playing Trials to the Sky.
Trails in the Sky.
Trails in the Sky.
Yeah.
FC. Sorry guys, I play all my games in Japanese, so I don't like hearing them saying it. But yeah. Trails in the Sky. I'm playing Trails in the Sky, the first chapter, and I'm loving it. I mean, the combat's so different. It's like a mix of strategy and like turn-based at the same time, and like it has the little tile system kind of from Fire Emblem, and it's crazy. Outside of that, I love the old school Final Fantasy turn-based combat. That's one of my staples, one of my favorites. I'll always love that. I love being able to take my time, pick what I want to do, make sure I make the right decision. I like stuff like that. Xenoblade Chronicles, obviously, action-based. It's my favorite series of all time. I mean, I've never really had a complaint of combat systems in JRPGs. They're just normal to me. They're just fun to me. I don't really know where the complaints come from. I don't like what are people playing that in which they don't like JRPG games? Is it just because they play FPSs mostly? Is it just because they play fighting games mostly? What is it you think that makes them say they don't like the combat? I mean, there's JRPG games that are a lot like God of War in terms of that kind of full-time action combat. There was one that just came out, and I believe it skipped the Switch, but it did come out on PS4, and I can't recall the name of it.
Star Ocean?
It is not quite Star Ocean, because Star Ocean has a little bit more verticality.
I really want to play that new Star Ocean game, though. I really want to play it one day. But what are you thinking of? Like, what is the game? Like, when did it come out?
Valkyrie Elysium.
Oh, Valkyrie Elysium. Yeah.
So like I said, there's a wide variety of games at this point. Like, I don't think you can really say it's the combat system. I think there's some other mental block you have to not want to play JRPGs, be that the art style, be that the dialogue. But there's enough variety out there in JRPGs to where you can pretty much find one to fit your needs as a gamer.
Yeah,
I think personally.
I just feel like people are building up walls around themselves to kind of I don't know. A lot of people stay away from JRPGs maybe because they might be overly complex or maybe too obtuse, and that's honestly something that I like about them, which other people may not. But I also see this with like maybe any other franchise at all, like Souls games. You can say like, oh, I don't like the difficulty, I don't like that system where if you die you lose all your points, you lose all your runes. Whereas there is a YouTube channel, I don't know if you know, do you know Ratatosker?
Yes, I know of him, but I'm not subscribed to him.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite newer content creators that I listen to. He made a video last year when Elden Ring came out, and it was a very blunt video. He said, everyone is complaining about Elden Ring's difficulty, why it doesn't have an easy mode. Everyone's complaining about the accessibility in the UI and how it's not good. Well, here's something. He's like, here's something. I am a fan of From Software games. I'm a fan of the Souls series. And as a fan of this Souls series and genre, I do not want an easy mode. I do not want things which are telling me what to do. I want to figure things out by myself. And that's the same thing with me in JRPGs, honestly. I don't want to have a combat system that is very easy to... I wouldn't say easy to pick up. I don't want a combat system that skips out on complexity, but is maybe more approachable with less complexity, if you get what I mean. I love complexity when it comes to my combat systems in a JRPG. I love the customization, the complexity, and the uniqueness. So that might be something that is maybe detracting people from the genre, which is fine, but I also think that people should give some of these games a chance, because there's more to the quality of these games than an obtuse and often complex combat system, which may not be that bad to begin with.
Well, I've seen people say that they love Dark Souls, but they'll never give a game like Code Vein a try.
Yeah.
And it's stuff like that that's really interests me, and I just find weird because
Yeah, I'll never be able
like
to.
Dark
Yeah.
Souls.
Yeah.
You know, it's weird.
Yeah, even I get what you mean. And even if a game is like turn-based and people are like, oh, I don't like turn-based combat, but maybe the story and the characters are amazing and the music is amazing, but they are just very turned off by the turn-based concept. But I wanted to ask you, do you think turn-based games are like a thing of the past? Do you think people are not playing turn-based games as much? And do you think the genre is kind of the subset of this JRPG genre, turn-based RPGs? Do you think that's kind of slowly dying down? What do you think about that?
It's hard to judge. I would probably say no. I would say they're probably as popular, if not more, just because of the indie scene and the AA scene. There's still tons of turn-based games coming out that you can grab. Square Enix is still making turn-based games that you can come out. They're just not the big AAA budget turn-based. We're still getting AA developers. I mean, what is it? Atelier.
Oh,
that's how you
Atelier Ryza, yeah.
Yeah. So that's an example of some turn-based games that are coming out.
Oh yeah, Atelier Sophie, I think, is the turn-based one. Atelier Ryza is the action one, I think.
It feels more turn-based, but I guess it feels a lot more turn-based. I have that game. I've been playing it.
Oh,
but I guess
I have no knowledge of what the Atelier series is like, so I may be wrong there.
Yeah, and yeah, so I don't know for sure. I mean, in terms of like Zeitgeist and like media reporting on them, and I guess general headspace of JRPGs, maybe they're not as big, but I don't know in terms of actual production and them getting put out that they're any smaller than they were, because again, like the indie scene and the AA scene are still booming in terms of turn-based games.
You have like Live Alive, you have Octopath, you have the Persona series, you have the Shin Megami Tensei series, you have the Fire Emblem series, which is not a traditional turn-based game, but it is like turn-based in that sense, even though it is tactics. And speaking of turn-based games, I do want to shout out one of the games I'm playing right now. It is a very, very, very old game. It is almost 30 years old, but still being that old, it has stood the test of time. And that is the power of this JRPG genre, is no matter how old these games are, they stand the test of time. That game is Chrono Trigger, and I'm sure you've played Chrono Trigger before. This is actually my first time playing it. I've wanted to play it for like the better part of a decade. I just never had the chance to. I never had the opportunity to. I would always procrastinate and whatever. That's another story. But I'm playing it right now. It is everything I wanted it to be, everything I expected it to be, and it's so magical when a game so old like Chrono Trigger feels so, like, I wouldn't say modern, but it doesn't feel old. You don't feel the restrictions. You don't feel anything holding you back, because the gameplay was so ahead of its time. The story literally still holds up today because of how genius and timeless and amazing and how well written it is. The music is timeless and like amazing, and just everything about Chrono Trigger is so charming and amazing. And that's the true testament to JRPGs, whether they're turn-based or non-turn-based or whatever. So yeah.
Chrono Trigger is one of those special ones that lives on like everyone's top 10 JRPG list. It's a timeless experience that you have to experience if you love JRPGs. But I kind of want to walk back a little bit about what I said on JRPGs, because I thought about it a little bit more, and I think that they may be doing just as good, if not better. I think about Persona 5 and how it completely shook the world. I mean, it broke Persona to be mainstream, really. Persona wasn't as mainstream until Persona 5 came out. It was big, but it was nowhere near as big as it is now.
The social link system for 3 and 4 did really break it out of its niche from Shin Megami Tensei and brought it into its own kind of, like, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did Persona 4 Golden still use the Shin Megami Tensei moniker?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Yeah, Persona 5 was the first one to break free of the Shin Megami Tensei moniker. And I think that really helped Persona 5 a lot. So,
Yeah, and I want to mention Dragon Quest XI, which
Yeah.
sold 6 million units. You know, Shin Megami Tensei 5, which is one of the best-selling Shin Megami titles. I think there's still a place for JRPGs. I think that the gaming market is so busy with everything else right now, they may get pushed to the side here and there, but there's definitely still a place for them. I think there'll always be a place for them. I just think they'll have to have a bit of a twist, like they do. You know, you can't just have a regular turn-based click X attack, use some magic. You need to have a little bit of a twist here and there, and we've seen JRPGs adapt to that and do that. Bravely Default plays differently than SMT. You know, Octopath plays differently than, you know, so I do think there's a place there. And honestly, I have to look, but they may even be growing. I'd like to actually look into that, maybe make a video on that.
Yes, I would. I think you were very much around and active in the JRPG space during like the mid 2010s, during the whole like kind of negative sentiment of JRPGs during that time. And I think the Switch has helped with the resurgence of the genre a lot. I think new development studios like Team Asano and like new talent coming into places like Atlas, Monolith Soft, and all these new places are really breathing new life into the JRPG genre, and I'm very, very happy to see that. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's a great genre. I don't think it's going anywhere. It's even turn-based, you know. This is a hard one, man. I really got to do some research on it, but I don't think they're going to die. And especially, like you said, in the 2010 era, when they were kind of a little bit more, there was a lot more pushback on it because everybody, quote, wanted to move forward with gaming and wanted to make changes. Well, I mean, I guess I was around during that era. I didn't see that much pushback, but, you know, I digress there. I'll let people keep it. There's been a lot of people coming out and saying there has been. When I was around, there still had plenty of great JRPGs that came out, like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy 13, which was massive at the time. The hype surrounding that game was ridiculous. Nobody cared, you know. So we'll see. I think JRPGs will continue to be healthy going forward.
Yeah. But real quick, I don't want to spend too long on this, but I did make a video on JRPGs, Final Fantasy 16, Yoshi P, and what he thinks about the genre and all that. And I wanted to get your opinion on some of this and what you think about a lot of what's going on with that talk with Yoshi P and how he's branding Final Fantasy 16 to be this new kind of experience for the JRPG genre.
Yeah, I did see your video. It was very well done. And I think most of this is just kind of a marketing thing. It's kind of they want to escape that niche and sell to a wider audience. They want Final Fantasy 16 to do great. Square Enix isn't doing that great as a company right now. They've had a lot of trouble, and they don't want to limit who they sell to. They don't want to limit how many copies they sell. So trying to escape that JRPG kind of branding that they're known for, especially Final Fantasy, it makes sense. You know, I'm not super interested in the game myself, but I can see where they're going for. And when you look at it and you look at the gameplay, it doesn't really look like what I would think. The first thing that pops into my mind isn't JRPG. It's actually like ARPG. So I kind of see where they're going with that. I think it's a little overblown, but him saying that like he doesn't like the like JRPG itself as a term is derogatory is crazy to me, but I see why they're doing it. And I personally would like a return to Final Fantasy being the premier JRPG, but hey.
Yeah. When it comes to the term JRPG, I personally don't see it as offensive or derogatory. I mean, I have not been in the shoes of Yoshi P or anyone who has developed Japanese RPGs, so I wouldn't know how people in Japan feel. But to me and my friends and everyone who I talk to, and a lot of like JRPG content creators, I've heard people like I don't know if you watch these channels like Gaming Shelf, David Vink, what's his name, Backlog Battle, and who else?
Player Essence?
Yeah, Player Essence is one, but there's another, Super Derek RPGs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Super Derek is another very, like, I love his content. I love all these people's videos and content, and they mostly cover JRPGs. And what's interesting is they've all had their take on this, and a few of them have differing opinions, but most of them have the same opinion in the sense that we've used this term for so long, and we've used it in a positive and supportive and happy and genuine connotation. But on top of that, like, you can't call a game like Skyrim or Mass Effect a JRPG. I mean, it is an RPG. A Skyrim is as much as an RPG as Xenoblade is an RPG, but they're not the same kind of RPGs. So you kind of want to distinguish them in some way. So a lot of these creators are even saying that if JRPG shouldn't be the term to be used, there should be a new term that should be thought of or introduced or considered. But what happens 15 years from now when they say they don't like that term? You know what I mean? Exactly. Yeah, it's a very touchy subject, but at the same time, I'm like, if there is a new term to be used, what would that term be? Because it's a strange, weird concept. But I still stand by the fact that JRPGs are a great, like, group of games, great genre. I love them, and they're just fun. But I do want to go into more detail onto some of our, like, wait, actually, before that, I do want to ask you this question, because I'm curious to hear your response versus my response. What do you think constitutes as a JRPG? Because JRPGs have, like, an essence to them. What do you think is that JRPG essence? Because for me, I have a set criteria of what I qualify as, like, a Japanese RPG. So I want to hear what you think.
When I think of JRPG, I see a certain art style, something a little bit more anime-ish. Not always, doesn't have to always strictly be that. Definitely a way in which storytelling happens that is a little different from what we see over here in the West, just because of, like, cultural things. Combat system can be varied. I know we talked about this before, and I kind of changed my stance on it. The combat system can be varied, but it needs to be kind of complex, customizable. I think of heavy storytelling. I think of world building, and it's so wide nowadays, the genre of JRPGs, but there's a certain essence to them. Like you said, there's a certain feeling to them. You just know when you're looking at the game it's a JRPG, and I guess it's just the philosophy behind the game, how it's built, and I think a lot of it does have to do with, like, art style and storytelling. When a trailer pops up and you see, like, anime characters running through the world, you're like, okay, that's an art JRPG. But yeah, it has to have that essence to it. It has to have deep, meaningful combat. It has to have a certain amount of storytelling, and I think length also. When I think of the word JRPG, I think of a lengthy, meaty game. But that's not always the case. But that's kind of what I think of. What about you?
So for me, I always, like, whenever I look into a game, I have a criteria that I like to go in for, and it's a very broad criteria. It's not like, I want this game to look like this, or feel like this, or have this kind of combat. It's always like, first of all, does the game have good gameplay? And if the game has good gameplay, then it already passes the test of my seal of approval, and it has my undivided attention there. And if it has a good story, that's another, like, icing on the cake, that the story and the gameplay go very well hand in hand. And the nice ribbon on the bow, like the nice, like, perfect last cherry on the top, is the music. If the music is good and is an enhancement to the experience, then that is so amazing, so perfect to me. I think JRPGs all have this. They have all three of these things. JRPGs have great gameplay, whether that is customization, unique combat, like I said before. Like, no two JRPG franchises are the same when it comes to combat and customization and the whole gameplay loop. JRPGs have very unique stories full of lore and very long-winded yet very engaging and enthralling stories with very interesting characters, very interesting set pieces, lore, world building, all that. And the thing that I feel like JRPGs all have in common is the music. The music is very encapsulating, very unique to that certain game or that certain genre, and the music will always tell a story. Music will always tell its own story, with subtext that maybe the dialogue or the actual game itself may not tell you. Xenoblade does this a lot. Xenoblade music tells its own story outside of the dialogue, outside of the words spoken, outside of the plot and the character development. The Xenoblade music tells a story about maybe a character's feelings which are hidden in the subtext. It might tell a story about the world and the lifespan of this location that you're in. And I can go into examples later, or I can make it my own video about some of these things, but that is the beauty of music in video games. And I think JRPGs have these three things all in common. Perfect gameplay loop and amazing combat, amazing story, very engaging and enthralling, and really good music. And you can say a lot of games outside of the JRPG genre do this as well, but I have never seen a genre have such a perfect balance of these things. And it's all of these are what I'm always looking for in a video game, so I'm usually never disappointed when it comes to a JRPG game, because they hit all three of those things so well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think JRPGs definitely do those three things better, or at least differently, or on a different level than a lot of the games that come out in the West. It seems to be a primary focus for them, and it's working, you know. And I think one thing that's not talked about enough is that J part. Like, a lot of JRPGs that come out have a lot of that. You can feel some of that Japanese essence in those games. You'll see a lot of the way in which they look at the world is differently than how we look at the world, and you get that in a lot of these JRPGs. You get one thing that JRPGs do that I think that they trump the West in is the way in which they're able to invoke emotion versus how we invoke emotion over here. They're a lot more expressive with their characters. They're a lot more emotional with their characters. The music hits at just the right time to kind of trigger you to feel what that character is feeling in that motion. They're not afraid to scream more in JRPGs. They're not afraid to express themselves more. And a lot of that comes from Japanese and Japanese culture, to where they're stoic. They're not really allowed to, it's not a part of their culture to express themselves as openly as we can express ourselves over here in the West. So a lot of that comes out in their creative ventures, and you see a lot of that in JRPGs. They are masters, where we're kind of masters in the prose. We're kind of masters in that in-between writing. They're masters at that that dialogue that it hits you, because it's always done, not always, but a lot of times it's done so well. It's done at the right times. The music is timed perfectly. You'll get a certain shot of a character from the side at a right angle where he's looking at someone, and you can just see the emotion in both of their faces. Where over here in the West, we tend to focus a lot more on realism, where over in Japan, they'll focus on these anime characters so that they can be more expressive. And that's another thing I really love about JRPGs and Japanese games in general, is that they're really able to express emotion, I think, a lot better than we are over here.
100% agree, and many games do that very well. And even some of the developers, or I think even Takahashi from Monolith Soft himself said that they chose the art style that they did in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 because of the fact that they can show more emotion with these characters. And you made a perfect segue into my next topic. What are some of your favorite JRPG stories, and what are some of your favorite JRPG OSTs or soundtracks? I'm very excited to hear this, and I'm very excited to share mine as well. So let's hear yours.
Well, obviously my number one favorite is the Xenoblade, and I made a whole video on what makes Xenoblade so special. But
it's an amazing video, by the way. I showed it to one of my friends who doesn't know much about Xenoblade, and he was moved. So I will say you did the job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, for Xenoblade, I think I love how the story is told, right? I love how they get into those really hard questions, especially within the meta narrative, and how they touch on things like philosophy, how they touch on theology, and they really try to tackle those hard questions that a lot of JRPGs will kind of shy away from, where you want to get more into the nitty gritty when it comes to the theology, where like I'll get a good example is like in Persona 5 at the end where you're fighting that god. Spoilers, by the way.
Yeah,
sorry about that.
Yaldabaoth.
Yeah, right. And sure, you know what it is and all that, but it doesn't really get into that. Like, what does that mean?
It was so out of nowhere all of a sudden. Yeah. I was like, what the heck?
You'll notice that with a lot of JRPGs where you start off like as a farmer and then by the end of the game you're fighting God. But in Xenoblade,
it's so natural.
It's just so natural. It's so deliberate. And then they try to answer some of those hard questions. I won't get into it too much because of spoilers, but I appreciated the attempt to go a little deeper and to answer some of those hard questions. What is God? What is man? What if man became God? The weakness of the flesh or the strength of the flesh. I said all of these quotes in that video, and I really like that. And this is on top of the awesome world building and character relationships and dialogue and things like that. On top of all of that is this really interesting meta narrative that will have you lose sleep because you want to know what's going on.
Yeah,
the second one is a bit of a surprise, but there's one that I really wanted to talk about, which was the original Kingdom Hearts, which a lot of people, you won't hear them say they like that because of the story. I loved it, and I'll tell you why. I love its simplicity. It's such a perfect game to me because it's about this kid going on this journey to find his friends, and that's what the whole story really is. Yeah, you have the princesses, and yeah, you have the Kingdom Hearts and all that, but at the end of the day, it's this story of this kid who wanted to leave his home and see the world, I guess, but obviously many worlds, but we'll see what's out there, and he does, and he goes and he finds his friends, and it's really that simple, and it's just beautifully done, and it stays with the point, and you get to see all these awesome Disney worlds. And I just remember, because I played it when it came out, and I was young, I was like 12 at the time, 13 at the time. I remember when I beat the game, it was the first time I ever cried finishing a video game, and it wasn't really because the movie, the story touched me or anything like that. It was more of I was finished with the game, and I was so upset that there was no more, because I had such a good time through that game, and it was packaged so cleanly to me, and I wasn't used to that, because I remember before Kingdom Hearts, the last JRPG I had played before Kingdom Hearts, I believe, was Final Fantasy X, and Final Fantasy X was a lot more expansive, and there was a lot more going on, and I remember playing this game, and it was just a deliberate, tight experience, and I really liked it. And there were still mysteries, don't get me wrong, Ansem and all of that, but I just loved how it was done. I loved the combat. I loved everything about it. So
you can say that it was packaged not only cleanly, it was packaged simple and cleanly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But here's my thing with Kingdom Hearts. I didn't get into it until like 2 years back, so I don't have that nostalgia that that a lot of people have with it. I have a friend who got me into the series, and I thank him very much for getting me into the series, but I always tell him, I'm like, if I played this as a kid, I would be as much of a fanboy as you are right now. And that's not to say I didn't enjoy the games, but it took me a little longer to enjoy and appreciate Kingdom Hearts 1. I will say this. Kingdom Hearts 2 is one of my favorite RPGs I've ever played. Every single thing I I wouldn't say disliked, but I had a problem with in Kingdom Hearts 1 was fixed, alleviated, and made better, and even at times more enjoyable than they were in Kingdom Hearts 1 for me. And I loved Kingdom Hearts 2 for that, and it is one of my favorite RPGs and action RPGs I've ever played. And
yeah, a lot of people call me crazy for preferring 1 over 2, but what can I say?
No, I understand where you're coming from. That's the nostalgia and just the preference and all that. But for me, I prefer 2, and I think they're both very good games. Like, especially 1, Kingdom Hearts 1 had a very, very amazing, like, tail end. Like, everything Hollow Bastion onwards is absolutely phenomenal. So good. A lot of that part of the game can be considered even better than some parts of Kingdom Hearts 2. Like, when you're fighting Riku, that sword fight when you're fighting Riku, oh my god, that's so well done. I loved it. So
yeah,
amazing.
It's definitely nostalgia, because it's like, you didn't say, oh, when I saw Squall, or oh my god, when I saw Cloud for the first time. That was me. Yeah. Like, when I saw Squall when you got to Traverse Town, I was like, oh my god, it's Squall. And then, like, when I saw Cloud walking by in the Olympia, I was like, oh my god, it's Cloud. You know, so yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I just hated that Squall called himself Leon. I'm like, bro, you know your name is Squall, right? You don't have to call yourself Leon. He's like,
I don't know why they did that. That was weird.
Yeah, I was like, you're stupid. Whatever. What are some of your favorite JRPG OSTs? I want to know that as well.
My favorite one of all time is Xenoblade Chronicles 2. There's something special about that OST. I remember like plainly, like it was yesterday, running through Gormott and just losing myself in the music. It was just so immersive. It was one of those rare experiences where, as an adult, I felt fully and completely immersed in the game. And the game has this multiple times to where the music is just perfect. I don't know how they do it. I do not know how they work with these composers to get them to make the music fit so perfectly, but it just does, and it's so beautiful and it's so well done. And it's like that for every game, but I think 2, the music was just a next level in terms of really helping with the immersion of the game. And especially at the end, like when One Last You started playing and it was building and emotional scenes are happening, and it was just unforgettable experience in that game. I think they completely nailed it. Another one I wanted to talk about, which a series that doesn't get enough respect that I'll be doing a video on soon, is The World Ends With You. Has one of the best soundtracks in video games.
Super underrated.
Super unique. They got like a bunch of indie artists, and it was amazing, really good. Actually, when you play Kingdom Hearts and get to Dream Drop Distance,
I know Neku, Shiki, and Joshua are in there, and I'm like, what? That's so cool.
Yeah, they couldn't even put it in Kingdom Hearts, couldn't save it. Anyway, very good soundtrack. I think a lot of people like that if you give it a shot. And right now, I'm in love with Trials in the Skies soundtrack. It is currently my number 2. It is right below Xenoblade. Like, I'm loving it.
That's really
cool. Man. Like, I want to go back and actually listen to it on YouTube so I can have all the names of the songs. But there's this one, and I think it's like called Sunbathing Cat or something like that, where it's just so relaxing. Like, you could fall asleep with it on, and it's at the perfect times. Really well done soundtrack. And actually, my friends who got me into the series, who told me to start it, told me, if you like video game music, you got to play this. It's up there with Xenoblade. And I was like, you're lying.
I'm so excited to play the Trails games. I'm so excited to give them a shot sometime.
I did mention one that's going to get me in trouble. Maybe 2.
Yeah.
Nier Automata, I did not love that soundtrack in the game.
Yeah.
I loved it outside of the game. It's on my like YouTube music playlist outside of the game, but I did not like it inside of that game for a couple of reasons. Running through the town, like the starting town, like I felt like it was so overbearing because it was so loud and like in my ear while I'm like running around, like not doing anything, just wandering around, and it's like building up, and I'm like, what is going on? Is like an alien invasion happening? Is a huge monster coming out of nowhere? Nope, I'm just traveling around, hitting a little vending machines and stuff, and it's just building this music in my ear. I was like, this feels so out of place to me. And like you mentioned once, was like traveling in the desert is still playing this music that feels like it's really building. And I think like I felt like a lot of the times in that game they should have been a lot more subtle in a lot of different areas in this game with this music. Yeah. And some of it was just a little overbearing.
The forest did it very well with the subtleties. That was very well done. In the forest, instead of the city, I can kind of understand. The forest had a soundtrack that was almost haunting in its vibe, and it's like the level of intensity. That was a very, very well done area, and I need to go back and complete that game. I've only done one ending, so I've only scratched the surface of what Nier Automata is.
That game, crazy.
Yeah,
you got to finish it. I'll just say that. And here's the one that's going to invalidate all of my opinions and probably make you block me.
Yeah.
I thought Persona 5 soundtrack was kind of just mid. Like I thought it was okay.
Well, I don't disagree with you in the sense that I think it is a very approachable JRPG OST for people who don't play many JRPGs, because they'll listen to the soundtrack and be like, yeah, that's cool, that's catchy. But that's also disregarding how good some of the OSTs in Persona 4 and Persona 3 are. I've yet to actually play Persona 3, but Persona 3 has some very good music. Like the moon reaching out to the stars, changing seasons, all those songs are amazing. And then Persona 4, for me, I will say this, Persona 4 as a game, I like it a little less than Persona 5, but I will say the whole vibe of Persona 4, the whole vibe, that whole essence, that whole OST, that soundtrack, that feeling that you get from walking around in Inaba, it reminds me of my childhood. And it's weird because Persona 4 you're playing as high schoolers, it's a very mature story, but Inaba itself, the vibe that it gets, that it gives and provides, and that music that complements that vibe really reminds me of like the simpler times when I was a kid. I don't know, it's very indescribable and hard to kind of describe, but that's...
I would argue that Persona 1, 2, and 3 and SMT, all the SMTs are better than Persona 4 and 5. Like except for SMT 5. I had some issues with SMT 5's music, but 4 and 3, I would argue SMT 3's OST destroys Persona 4 and 5. Just on merit alone in terms of how it builds atmosphere and how it works within that game. I would say it perfectly fits that game.
I've played a decent bit of SMT5 and I love the OST so much.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Like there's some songs that I love and I have them like in my JRPG music playlist on Spotify, along with like World Ends With You and some other games. So yeah, I need to play 4 and 3 as well.
What is that song's name in Persona 5 that like plays when you're on the boss fight?
Blooming Villain, right?
Yeah, I love. Wait, where's like playing the main theme song like when you're fighting the villain? Is that it?
Okay, there's Blooming Villain, which plays in normal boss fights, and then there's Rivers in the Desert, which is playing against like later boss fights in the game. It
must be that one. I like how they did that. I thought that was really good.
Rivers in the Desert is the one that has vocals.
How you ran through the entire like castle, and then you'd go and fight, and then it'd be that music. I thought that was well done. But besides that, I mean, I thought that Persona 5 OST was really good. I just didn't put it in like my top.
Yeah, I enjoy it for what it is. I think it gives a very unique kind of vibe and very unique kind of style, which I honestly haven't heard in any other form of music and game, so I like it for that. But I will say, here are some of my favorite JRPG stories and OSTs before we close out. And pardon my rambling, but I will say, you said Xenoblade Chronicles as a series. I will go a step above and specify Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has now become one of my favorite video games of all time. It is my favorite Xenoblade game, and I would argue maybe even my favorite JRPG. And a lot of people's there are very mixed opinions when it comes to the Xenoblade series, because there might be a game that I think is objectively the best, whereas someone might throw an entirely big curveball. Like, I did not know the Xenoblade 2 fans loved Xenoblade 2 this much until after I beat Xenoblade 3, because I expected everyone to like flock and be like, Xenoblade 3 de facto best Xenoblade game, but everyone's still like, oh, I prefer Xenoblade 2, I think Xenoblade 2 does this better, that better. That's another discussion for another time, but I will say I personally vibed and related and felt more attached with the story of Xenoblade 3, because I really like the idea and the concept of you have a limited time on this earth, and time is like against you. Every single second of your life, you're either learning to fight or fighting. You're out there fighting continuously over and over and over again. You don't have the privilege and the like time to just enjoy with your friends, to grow up, to like enjoy the smaller things in life. And when people, like, when the party members of Xenoblade 3 really understand that fact, they're like, how can we change this? How can we break from this cycle? How can we break from this cycle of never-ending conflict and violence and fighting? How do we break free from this? And it's so interesting to see them like approach normal things in our lives that we take for granted, and for them it might be something so sacred or something so unheard of, like the fact that they see an old person for the first time and they're like, who is this like old person? Why does he look like this? Why is he so shriveled up? And like, why does he look like this? Because to them, life is only from the age of 10 to the age of 20. They don't know what it's like to live past the age of 20 and into your middle-aged years and your older years and old age and all that. It's such a foreign concept to them. And even the concept of a city of people, because all they know before that is colonies where soldiers are stationed, and soldiers learn to fight and train and go out and fight. But when they find a city, they're like, wow, this is a city full of people working together to like build a new future. That's like something so unheard of, but it's so like powerful and impactful and amazing that something like this can like be achieved. And I think Xenoblade 3's themes, not only the like things that happen in the story, but I think the themes really resonated with me the most. The theme that it is never too late to change, stagnation will always be your biggest enemy, and conflict will never result in any like proper outcome. Like when you learn to see eye to eye with each other, that's when like things will be better, and that's when like you will like move forward into a new future. And
yeah, I like that you said that, because think of it like, what if they did start getting along? Maybe they could come up with a solution, right? I mean, two heads are better than one. So yeah, I think you make a good point there, you know.
Oh like, yeah, and that's what Ouroboros is all about. It's about two sides coming together, realizing that there's something wrong, and the will to change, the will to start anew, and the will to make things better. That's what like if you, and another thing is like the cast of characters is my favorite in any Xenoblade game, probably in any JRPG as well. Because you think about the Keves side and you think of the Agnes side, you look at them at the start of the game, they hate each other. Like think about like Lance and how he's so hesitant to like get along with someone like Senna or Mio, and how Taion is always so like distant, and he's like, I don't really care about these people, I don't know if I trust them or anything. And even like when Noah and Mio fight each other for the first time, they want to like they're really hell-bent on like killing each other until Noah's like, hey, I think we should stop. There's something deep down inside of me telling me to stop. And they still go at it until Van Damme kind of like tells them, hey, what are you guys doing? Stop this. And it's a really powerful theme, and the whole concept of Mobius being like, oh, we are afraid of change. We don't want change. We don't want this future. We want to be comfortable in our own kind of environment, in our own kind of like little bubble. And that fear and that negativity and that sentiment boils up to such an extent that it creates this negative force of Mobius. I thought that was very interesting and cool, even though like I do have my problems with Mobius, but I think that whole concept was very well integrated into the story. I think N is one of the coolest villains ever, and I also think that I'm rambling way too much about Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
N did nothing wrong. The most objective opinion you can have.
I will say N is a very cool villain. I will use that so-and-so character did nothing wrong more when it comes to Jin than I would with N. I will say that.
Ew, no, man. I hate... Okay, listen, this is a conversation for another podcast, but let me tell you, I did not like Jin.
Oh, I love Jin. I love Jin. I love N. I love Egil. I love the sympathetic villains. We'll talk about this some other time, though. But yeah.
Can I at least say like 1 minute on why Malos is the best villain?
Yes, I'm curious to
just
hear.
Just give me 60 seconds. Malos is the best villain because
yeah.
I just love how he accepted his role, how he accepted his fate, how he said to himself, I may not have wanted this. I might be evil. I might want to do things like that. I'm just going to accept it, and then I'm going to do my best at it. And I just thought that was such a well-written way to have him. And then at the end, actually, I don't want to get into any spoilers because there might be people that play, but I just love the way in which he was developed. I love the way how it wasn't this like villain who's just evil to be evil, and it just, I love the way that was done. And then for Jin, it was like, oh, my girlfriend. And I was like, oh. Okay.
I think there's more to Jin than just that. It was, of course, he lost his loved one, but he also has that resentment towards Amalthus. And like, oh my god, Jin's speech in chapter 5 always sends chills down my spine, because it's like, you're always like, hey dude, why are you like doing this? Why are you like trying to kill everyone? Like what's up? Like why are you like so mad and angry all the time? And then that's his whole speech about like blades aren't given the same rights as humans, blades aren't accepted in the same way that humans are. Why has the architect created this world where blades are the way they are, whereas humans are the way they are? Why do we have this disparity between blades and humans? And that also fueled by the death of Laura is like, I want to kill the architect and I want to kill Amalthus, and I am very sad and angry, and that's why I like Jin.
I have a lot of problems with that, but we'll get into that at a later time, don't worry.
Yes. But anyways, yeah, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, I just really related to it in that sense with its themes, its narrative, and all that. I really like the game. People have their issues with it. I didn't have as many issues with it, but that's also another story for another time, especially with the DLC coming out. I think the DLC will fix a lot of those things, which many people prematurely judge the game off of, but again, that's fine. Other stories, I will say, with the Persona series, I prefer the story of Persona 4 over Persona 5. I love the kind of what is that? The murder mystery aspect of it, and the fact that you're all high schoolers solving this murder mystery, doing it better than the police. I thought that was so cool. I thought that was very well done, very fun, just very wholesome, all in all.
I will admit, I'm one of the few people who isn't really a huge fan of like the way in which Persona 4 and 5 kind of, well, all of them really handle. I'm a little older, I think, so it's harder for me to immerse in those kind of high school stories, which is why I played Persona 5 for the first time last year, and I gave it like an 8 out of 10. But a lot of people can relate a lot better with it. than I can because I've been out of like high school for so
yeah,
long, you know.
yeah.
So I'm an adult playing it,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I can't really relate to these characters and stuff like that. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I will say, it's funny when I feel like a lot of the characters are relatable in Persona, but I also feel like it's funny when characters that are not as realistic are more relatable, meaning like Xenoblade 2 and Xenoblade 3 characters.
Yeah.
When you kind of like draw parallels to like people you know in your life, and like you kind of relate to them based off of like who you are as a person, I think that's very interesting. And that's a true testament to how good Xenoblade's character writing is. And
oh, wait until you try Trails, man.
oh my god, I'm
character writing is
yeah.
A+.
Yeah. Trails in the Sky, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very excited, very excited to play Trails. But one more game I really want to talk about, which I've been playing as of late, is Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger has a very timeless story, and the thing about Chrono Trigger is it takes place in so many different time periods, and it's so interwoven so well, because you're the one kind of hopping between these time periods. And I would say maybe the character dialogue isn't as good in Chrono Trigger, but the plot is very well done. I don't want to give too much away, but there are some small little insignificant moments like riddled away in the story, and sometimes way later into the story you might be like, whoa, this referenced that thing way back in the beginning of the game, and I'm like, whoa, that I did not know that's a small insignificant thing had such a big impact on the story, if you know what I mean. And Chrono Trigger bleeds into my talk on my favorite OSTs, favorite soundtracks, because Chrono Trigger is the first credited soundtrack of my favorite video game composer, and that's Yasunori Mitsuda. Mitsuda did Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, he did Xenogears, and he did the phenomenal soundtracks of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 3. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is my favorite video game OST, just like Jeff said, and that is based off of the fact that it is one of the most emotional soundtracks I've ever heard in anything, and it is like expressing such raw, pure emotion in every single song. And like I say, the storytelling is there in these songs, especially in Xenoblade 2 and 3. It employs this kind of narrative tool of the light motif. And leitmotifs are like motifs in the music that are reoccurring that kind of tell their own story. Xenoblade 3 uses a lot of these. It has like the Kevis Offseer melody, the Agnes Offseer melody, the Ouroboros melody, the Mobius melody, there's so many other leitmotifs sprinkled around in there that you can hear in songs throughout the game, and you're like, oh, I didn't know that it was referring to this or like trying to reference this, but that gives a whole new context to this scenario, if that makes sense. And Xenoblade 2 does this a lot with songs like the title screen theme. It's called Where We Used to Be, that is used so much throughout the game, and that song is effectively saying like Elysium is in the distance. Elysium is such a long forgotten memory in a dream, but maybe one day we'll get there. Maybe one day we'll reach this goal of Elysium and build a new world. And you can hear that in like Where We Used to Be, obviously. You can hear it in Elysium in the Dream, Elysium in the Blue Sky. You can hear it a bit in Counterattack as well. But my favorite instance of this is in the Tomorrow With You, which is my favorite Xenoblade song. It is a very emotional melody, very good. And you can also hear that leitmotif at the very end of One Last You. So yeah, Xenoblade does leitmotifs very well, and that's also thanks to Mitsuda's amazing compositions. And another great composer I really like is Yoko Shimomura, who does Kingdom Hearts. She does the Mario and Luigi series, and she's done a lot of older Square Enix IPs. I think she's done Live Alive. I'm planning on playing that game soon, so I'm very excited to hear some music from hers as well.
What can I say? I agree.
Yeah, that's my massively long JRPG rant. And before we close out, I did want to ask you this kind of silly question. Do you think the JRPG is the best genre in video games?
I do. Obviously, I can't say this subjectively. It's super subjective, but I truly do. I think I've spent more time in JRPGs. I think I've enjoyed the genre more than any other genre. And one thing no other genre has ever done to me is make me cry. And I've experienced that 3 separate occasions while playing JRPGs. So I think any game, any form of media out there in general that is able to invoke such emotions in someone like me above everything else and make me cry, it's going to be a special genre. And I think that for anyone, right? If a genre makes you that emotional, it's probably going to be your favorite. And I think that's why I love JRPGs so much, is they're able to evoke emotions better than any other genre I've played.
Oh yeah.
And I've played a lot of, and I don't want anyone to take this wrong, I've played a lot of Western RPGs. I've played the Skyrims, the Morrowinds. I've played hardcore CRPGs, right? I've played Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous. I've played tons of Divinity Original Sin. I've played a lot of these games, and the only genre every time that is able to really make me feel emotions is the JRPGs. And I think that's a testament to the writing style that they have in Japan.
Yeah, I agree as well. Xenoblade is the only series that has made me cry. Zelda has done it maybe a handful, like very few times, even though Zelda is my favorite video game franchise. Xenoblade is the one that always does it. Like the ending of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I feel like we can both talk about that for ages, but the ending of Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is one of my favorite video game endings. It is not only maybe my favorite video game ending, it is my favorite ending to like any story ever. It's done so well with the dialogue, the music, the set pieces, the emotion that is delivered in those final hours. And I had tears in my eyes with the ending credits, and it was so perfectly well done. And Xenoblade 3 as well. Xenoblade 3, I won't spoil this because it's a very, very big, important part of the game, but in the middle of the game, you definitely know what I'm talking about here. There's a point in the game where you feel like you've lost. You feel like the game is like over and you got the bad ending, like a very, 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 very bad ending.
Yes.
And you're like, oh boy, I did not expect to be in this bad of a situation right now. And like, again, the music kicks in, and it's a very good, very emotional moment. But if that particular song was not in that particular moment, I would not have been crying. I will say that. Because that moment, that cutscene, the things that were happening in that cutscene, mixed with the music and that particular song, you guys know what I'm talking about here. That really pulled me on the heartstrings there.
Yeah, that was very well done.
That was very. That is probably, that whole section is probably if one of my favorite, if not my favorite moment in the entire Xenoblade series. And then people will come out and say, oh, that cutscene was too long. And I'm like, please make that cutscene another hour long. I don't mind sitting through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, any final things you want to talk about when it comes to JRPGs and the genre, the games, the stories, the music, any of that?
I think we did a good job covering it for what we talked about, but I did want to just say, if again, the same thing that I said in the last discussion with the Switch, if you're on the fence, do some research, look into what you like in games, and try to find a JRPG that emulates that in a way that you think you would enjoy, and then jump in and give it a try. Set aside some time and try to finish a JRPG and see if you like it, because again, the last thing I want is for a gamer out there to miss an experience because of some notion that they have, or out of ignorance, or whatever the case may be. They definitely have an experience out there somewhere for you that will fit you, and I think that you'll have a new understanding and a new appreciation of the JRPG genre if you just look a little bit harder and find one that you think that you like.
100% agree. Yeah, I always say, when it comes to games, just play them with a open mindset, and you might be surprised with some of the things that you experience. So yeah, definitely. 100%
I also want to
agree.
thank you for having me on. I had a blast today.
Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, I'm very glad we got to do this. And once again, check out Jeff's channel, Nintendo Vault, linked in the description below. He talks all things Nintendo gaming, JRPGs, all that stuff. And if you like the stuff on my channel, I'm sure you'll love his channel as well. So yeah, go check out his videos, go give him a subscribe, go like his videos, and yeah, thank you so much, Jeff, for joining today.
Anytime.
Yeah, and once again, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel for more content like this. This is Nishquik and Nintendo Vault signing off. Have a great day and go play some great games today. Hopefully it is a JRPG. We shall see you in the next one. Later.